Hope you guys are doing well. Some of you look a little tired. Some of us got a good night's rest, and some of us didn't. Obviously, congratulations to the Nuggets and Mike and his staff and the team. It was fun to watch, and you get a couple of seats, and no one tells you you're going to be sitting next to David Thompson. And so my wife complained to me that I ignored her all night, and I kept asking David questions about how much zone Miami was playing and yada yada. Then finally, I said, I think it's 4-to-1 ratio of zone versus man. And he looked at me and said, you've been coaching too much. But it's tremendous for the city. There's nothing like it. And, to have the confetti fall on those guys for what they achieved is special. And we always use this term, they'll walk together forever. That team will, forever. Anyway, first practice in. Really, these practices are very similar to what we've been doing. Any questions relative to what we're doing?
We have a wireless mic, so raise your hand, we'll find you. Oh, Mike.
Yeah, Coach. Frank Clark, you reached agreement since we talked.
Yeah, that's all taken place. There's a couple loose ends here. We're all on the same page. Met again this morning. It's all good. He'll be starting at the start of training camp. We knew that going in. He's got a ring ceremony coming up. That'll be a little awkward. But anyway, it's good to have him joining us.
And then could you just talk about the decision to bring him in and why?
Yeah, look, a pressure player, someone that I remember doing a lot of work on when he came out of the draft. And we followed him, obviously, at Seattle first and then in Kansas City. It's one of the areas that, that we paid close attention to. And, we'll find a role within what we're doing where he can help us. I think it's always a challenge to find those guys that you can say are pressure players, but he's one of them. And certainly he's excelled in the postseason, both in Seattle and in Kansas City. So, that's the vision.
What have you made of the work that your wide receivers have done so far, and what will separate the guys? Like, what progress can you make this time of year?
Yeah, look, I think I said this before. I think, in order for those guys to truly get evaluated, the alignment, the assignment, knowing what to do, the installation we're giving them, it's in chunks. And so these days, we don't really separate the minicamp from the OTAs. It's a little longer practice. The meetings are a little longer, but nonetheless, we kind of stay on an installation schedule. All of it preparing them for, training camp with the pads and so consistency. The discipline at that position in painting the perfect picture within the route for the quarterback, and then the ability to block the force. Any team that runs the ball well in our league, you've got to be able to handle either the safety force or the corner force. And so some of it's easier to measure. I think it's easier for us to see receiver DB play out here than it is the internal. The closer to the ball during these non-padded practices, I think it's harder to evaluate, truthfully, especially with the tempos. And so, they're making progress. We've got a few guys. We're allowed to have some tryout players here. We have a few. And then, we carry it over into training camp, and we start again with the first install. And so repetition, obviously has always been the mother of learning, and you repeat it. Too many flags on the ground for me today. It was good to have the officials here, and yet, we ran out of sand in some of the penalty, flags, so they had to go get backup flags. Before you start figuring out how to win, you got to know how not to lose. And so last year we ranked, I don't even want to give it to you, 28th and 27th, 29th in pre-snap fouls on both sides of the ball. And that's going to change. So it's good to have that pointed out. And I like the way they're practicing. I like the intensity. I like their effort. And I think, man, they're working hard. But you also got to be smart. And so that would be one takeaway from today's practice.
Coach, what drew you to keeping Alex Singleton? Why did you want him back? And with Clark, is he an outside linebacker or
He's an OLB.
He's an
Yeah,
OLB.
he's an edge player. And with regards to Singleton, you know, just the consistency, the performance, the vision, him knowing the defense, playing well on a good defense a year ago, his communication skills. You know, it's a harder position to evaluate in the draft anymore because you're getting lighter and lighter in the college game. You know, you're 20 years ago, there were certain positions that were hard to evaluate, and 20 years later, you know, you've got safety body types playing linebacker, and so you're constantly projecting where do you see a player in college. It's hard to find a fullback, you know. You know, we drafted a linebacker who we think is prototype. You know, you'll hear me use that term. I like bigger players, and but with him, you know, it was his production, and you kind of know what you're getting, which is a great trait to have as a player.
Toward the end of practice, you kind of had that field goal moment there. It looked like in the end zone. Can you
Yeah.
just take us through?
So we did. Listen, I've never met Jim Turner. I met Tom Dempsey once as a kid, you know, in training camp, and got an autograph. He was my first autograph ever, Tom Dempsey. And then 38 years later, I'm the head coach of the Saints, and I meet him at a Saints function. And so we did a little research on Jim Turner. You guys know, 9 years here, you know, 3 field goals with the Super Bowl win with the Jets. He was a kicker for us, our first Super Bowl. And then he did something that will never be done again. He kicked a 9-yard field goal. Obviously, the uprights were at the goal line then. And so we made the kickers today kick straight on, and we spotted the ball 9 yards deep in the end zone. And when you actually look at that field goal, it's not an easy one to hit. In fact, all the offensive linemen were worried about getting buried in the back. And both kickers had never kicked straight on, so they didn't have a square toe. But that was just for them to recognize a little bit of the history here. And, you know, that's a member of our Ring of Fame. And so he passed, and we had 2. Fortunately, we were 2 for 2. In fact, we looked a little better kicking it straight on than we did with some of the soccer-style attempts. So anyway, just in honor of him. Yeah.
Sean, is pass rush specialist something that you've typically had as an assistant coach on your staff before? And what
I think I think the game obviously is still, you've got to affect the quarterback somehow. And so there's a lot that goes into that. You know, it's hard to affect the quarterback if you're not stopping the run. So if you're having success stopping the run, then you get to those down and distances where, you know, you see multiple defensive packages based on tendencies. And so, you know, hopefully, you know, our outside linebacker position are guys that we look at as pressure players. You don't have to be an outside linebacker only to be a pressure player. You can be an interior lineman who's exceptional, but there's some traits, you just can't check that box. Safeties in the history of our game have been pressure players. Inside linebackers, some of them are pressure players, some of them aren't. And the ones that aren't are still very good linebackers. And so we use that term when evaluating talent. You know, does this guy have the potential to be a pressure player? I think Frank does. I think there's a number of players on our team that have those traits. But if you lack those traits in your lineup, then you're forced by scheme to create pressure, and then you get into a whole nother game. So, you know, I think that it's evolved to obviously more of a passing game. You've got to be able to sub guys in and out. It's a hard position to play, 60, 70 snaps. I'm watching the game last night, the center for the Heat, I'm not sure of his name. He played a lot of minutes, right? And I said that to David. I said, man, this guy hadn't come out of the game. And so that depth is important when it comes to, because it's a constant fight. It's like wrestling. You ever wrestle with somebody or, it's exhausting. And so having enough of those guys that can affect the quarterback, especially in our division.
Coach, speaking of that spot, outside linebacker Baron Browning had a procedure on his knee. What is your concern level with him, and did that play in to you signing for
I think
Clark?
it's a fair question, and probably to some degree, yes. I'm not going to give updates on injuries, but yes. Obviously he's someone, he'll end up starting the season on PUP, but outside of that, I think that had a little bit to do with it, and that's part of the deal. Yep.
Yeah, I've got kind of more of a big picture question.
Yep.
There's been more than a dozen coaches who won a Super Bowl with one team and then later went on to coach another team. Nobody's won a Super Bowl with two different teams. Holmgren got to a second one. You
Holmgren,
obviously-
Parcells, I think those are the two, right?
Yeah, but so my question is, I know you've only been here a couple months, but does it increase the expectations even more that you're a guy that's won a Super Bowl before and a lot of people are expecting him
I
to
think
do it
this,
again?
to answer your question, let me try to explain it. When it's happened once, you ever do something, you're so excited after you've done it once, you can't wait to show somebody. You've seen a movie, you've been to a great restaurant, you got a great Christmas gift, it's unbelievable, and you just can't wait for someone else. That's kind of like winning a championship where you're addicted to it. And so, last night, being in that moment and watching them enjoy it, it's just, there's nothing like it. It's borderline obsessed. And so, we, after 2009, had a number of, close, tough playoff games, big wins, some tough losses. And you want everyone that has not had that opportunity. And if I said to you, pretend you have a picture of what it's like, and then I said, I want you to times it by 100,000. And it's even better than that, And so that's why we're so, with regards to your question, no, but I'm well aware of what you're talking about, and but it's not from a personal or selfish. It's like you want others to have a chance to experience it, and so that you can say, because that fulfillment when you give a great gift and someone like frickin' where you take them somewhere and it's everything. It's the same thing, but just times 100,000.
A couple things. Saw you working with Surtain a little bit, which is interesting. I don't know if that's a consideration for the season.
What was I doing with Surtain?
Punt return.
Yeah, look, all of these guys are going to have roles, and you start asking questions and you start getting answers, and he did in high school, and so I want to know who we're going to if number one's not ready. I want to know, if you want to look, there's 53 on your roster, 47 game day, and if I need a gunner taken out of the game, then who better to do that than Patrick? That's what he does for a living. And so it's not just offense, go over here, defense, go over here, and the kicking game, go over here. I watched Lawrence Taylor in a game at the Giants where they were winning pretty handily, and the team they were playing came back with a couple kick returns. And I watched Lawrence Taylor remove about 5 guys on the kick coverage unit and brought defensive players out and just lined them up and covered a kick. And that's when you got something. And so these are snaps. There's snaps in a game that are valuable. And so if Surtain can help us as a returner when needed, then we'll have him ready.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to follow. The question I want to ask, though, too, is about culture. Michael Malone said that you can't flip a switch, you can't check a box with culture. Perhaps we saw a little bit of it today with the Jim Turner stuff. I want to know what you think about building a culture and what it takes to do that.
I'm asked that a lot. I do think it starts with the ingredients. So the recipe for culture starts with, who's in the building. It's hard to have the right culture if you don't have the right ingredients. And then it's the attention to every detail. I think there's got to be passion involved with that. And so in the procurement process of players, you've really got to dig into, and it's the hardest thing now for us, is finding guys that truly love their job. And it's not a slight against, but it's finding the right people to build the culture around. And we can evaluate the talent on the tape, but all the other aspects that are challenges in today's NFL that may not have been challenges in the 70s or early 80s, they're challenges today. There's 3 fights that you have to win every day. There's a sign in the locker room. Number 1, division from within. Number 2, your competition. And number 3, all right, public perception. So your Jerry Jeudy, he catches 2 balls. We win the game. He gets hit up on Twitter, though. Everyone who played him in fantasy's pissed off. And that's one of the things you saw with the Nuggets. I mean, there's times where you're looking at Jokic, and I'm like, man, I want you to be a little bit more selfish. You feel an unselfish team, and then when you start winning, and you get that, then you're on the right track. But it's something like a garden. It has to be tended to every day. You go 3 days, and so you have to have open and honest dialogue, and be not afraid of confrontation or the truth. And I think players want that still. In fact, I know they do. And then you're on to something. But I do think it starts with the right people in the building, and that's not just the players, it's not just the coaches, it's people. We're in the passion business. And so, you're looking for all those traits. Some might even be Boy Scouts. Where's Cortland at? He here? Yeah, we found out Cortland was a Boy Scout today, so nobody knew that. All right.
Coach, I actually wanted to ask you about Cortland because asked him about Michael Thomas. Their measurables are almost identical, combine and stuff, and he said he started looking at Michael Thomas tape. What similarities, if any, do you see, and can he be that productive?
Well, look, he's looking at Mike's tape because Mike played X, and that's where he's playing, and the offense is similar, and so there's some things that I was encouraged when I read that because he's going to line up in a lot of those spots. Now, listen, both of those 2 players have had exceptional starts to their careers and done and accomplished a lot of things. And so I'm learning Cortland's progress. He's doing well. Man, he's transitioning well. I give him a hard time. That 2019 album he put out was pretty good. And so we're looking for another real good soundtrack, 2023. He wants to please, and he works his tail off. He's big, he's strong. And so those are similarities. He's passionate. Michael was passionate. Of course, Michael hadn't been healthy because of a handful of injury complications. But I think the natural thought is like, look, he's looking at the tape because he's in an offense now that he can see the schemes that we're installing. And so, we've got cut-ups, hundreds of plays, for the players to see examples. You get it doesn't have to be our team. It could be, any team in the league, but you see something you like, you cut it up and there's a picture and it says 1,000 words for the player. And so, yeah, I like that he was looking at that.
Hey, Sean, Albert Okwuegbunam had a couple of plays today down the middle. What have you seen from him so far in the offseason, and what steps do you want to see?
He can run. He's athletic. I think consistency. I think he's made progress, and so he's at that stage where we always this is the time, and so he did make a few plays. I was encouraged with that, and I think that as a teacher, our job is to get to hit the ceiling with these guys, and he's been very attentive. Be it we're not in pads yet, and so that tight end position is interesting. Some of them are better run blockers, some of them better receivers. He's certainly athletic, and I've said this a million times. Confidence is born out of demonstrated ability. Like, we can wish for confidence, and you can say I'm confident, but we've all seen moments where players do something in a game, and all of a sudden. So it has to be born out of demonstrated ability. So there's a catch he makes today that gives that young man confidence that he can do it again, and that's the growth spurt. It can't just be wished for. Ultimately you hit a clutch shot, or you make a pass, and man, there's incremental growth. But we've all seen, all of you that's covered sport have seen people develop. Like right in front of our eyes. Shoot, the rookie from Kansas a few games back. I mean, I don't know if that was his normal performance, but he gained confidence that night, and we'll never forget that night. But you follow me though, that is how it's born. That's confidence, and it's born out of demonstrated ability. And so, as a coach, it's exciting to see. All right. Thank you, guys.